headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
What I've been tuning into I think this really desperate situation in Ukraine needs high-quality, fact-checked information. And I'd just want to make a plea to people, but also the world's media, to be so careful about what they share. I think that in general, certainly in this country, people have been kind of red-pilled by COVID.
Right.
Some of the media coverage was woeful. And there's now this beyond a healthy level of scepticism. I think people are ready to imagine misinformation and conspiracy where there might be none. And so it's more important than ever that real information is shared. And what we've actually seen already is lots of imagery and lots of video being misattributed, being shared like wildfire on social media, and it's not true. I mean, even the BBC is guilty of it. I say even
When you
the
say
BBC.
even the BBC, I assume you mean that with your tongue firmly in your cheek, right?
Yeah, so that I was, I gave you that one. Yeah, so even the BBC's done it. Now, that's been full-facted, but the BBC showed some footage, supposed footage, of the Russians invading Ukraine, and it included a military parade video. And they say it's an error. I find it hard to understand how it's an error that, you pick out a bit of video from the archive, you insert it into another video. But anyway, however it happened, it wasn't true.
Right.
So that shows that, in the busyness in a newsroom, in a war, even the most credible media organisations make mistakes.
Well, I think some of them also work with what they're given, and there's been at least one case where the Ukrainian government put out a misinformation video about something that was supposed to have happened, which turned out to be a piece of old video. And you can't forget that during wartime, sometimes there is such a thing as propaganda. I mean, that was when it was invented for a war. It wasn't invented for peacetime, but propaganda was invented for war.
Yeah.
And so if you're on either the Ukraine or the Russian side, you're going to be putting things out which might not be entirely truthful.
Yeah, do you know what I mean, what I'd say about this is when you're in a war, you have to remember that out there's also an information battlefield. There are deliberate state actors and there's propaganda, but there's also misinformation that arises because people get very emotive about the coverage. So that's why even credible media organisations don't verify the source properly because they're in a rush in the newsroom and, they know it's clickbait.
Right.
There was an example where Bild shared some video footage that was actually from a video game.
Right.
A video game.
Yes, I mean, that shouldn't be possible, really, should it? You'd think they'd be able to tell the difference.
Exactly.
I'd like to think I could tell the difference.
There was a picture, video actually, of a young girl confronting a soldier in the Ukraine, but it's not the Ukraine. She's Palestinian.
Yeah.
And it's years old. So this kind of thing doesn't help. I mean, of course, there will be brave young girls in Ukraine, and there may well be brave exchanges, but that wasn't one of them. That's actually from Palestine. But then there's another one where it goes around full circle. All of the front pages of the newspapers in this country, it was the 24th or 25th February, showed a woman with blood on her face. Yes. And then it was suggested that was misinformation.
I don't think that was. I think the previous picture that they showed that proved that it was somebody who had been in another incident somewhere before, I don't think, one, it was the same person, and also, two, I just didn't believe that. And quite often, knowing what I know about newspapers, same newspaper will pick the same picture because it's the best picture.
Exactly.
And that was by far and away the best picture.
Exactly. So people said, no, this is a gas explosion from Russia. No, the photographers confirmed that woman was photographed in the Ukraine. But it goes full circle on the misinformation. There's misinformation about misinformation. But I think that's because people are naturally cautious. As you said, there is propaganda in wartime. And I think we've been red-pilled by some of the COVID media coverage. So that actually comes down to all of us.
Yes.
Don't share something on social media unless you know it's true.
Right.
Don't be tempted
but
by
then,
that
of course,
video.
an awful lot of people won't know whether it's true and will never know whether it's true.
Then don't share it.
Right.
Don't pass it on if you're not sure. The problem with the deliberate and the accidental propaganda that you get in wartime is it creates a lot of jingoism, emotionalism, and when the coverage is very emotive, and let's be honest, the coverage here has been very emotive so far, that affects your reasoning. And then it becomes personal and it can become nasty. So anybody that's asking questions at the moment is a Putin cheerleader.
Yeah.
Well, there's no need to create those kinds of divisions.
No.
I think everyone's looking to triangulate opinions and understand what's going on. And the other thing is it leads to some
many people are coming out with what they think is the truth, which is, their truth, and they already know more than anybody else what the situation is. I mean, I get lots of people saying, why are you not giving both sides of the argument? Well, the two sides of the argument are this. There is only one fact. The fact is Russia invaded Ukraine. That's a fact. Whether or not you agree with it is not the issue. Whether or not you think it was justified is not the issue. The fact is that they did it.
I agree.
That's what I say.
I don't have the political science background. I haven't been an international journalist of long standing. I don't know the geopolitical background. But Russia's an aggressor. It's invaded. People are displaced from their homes. There's war going on. Those are the facts.
Yeah.
Understanding the coverage gets a little bit harder. But the other thing with this very emotive coverage is then leads to situations where you had Sir Roger Gale here in the studio saying that Russians should be expelled from Britain. Well, I think this is a really ridiculous suggestion.
It is.
The idea that
I think even he now realises it was a ridiculous suggestion.
Basically a handful of ordinary Russians being sent back to Russia isn't going to change Putin's mind. And not only that, it would undermine our own moral authority, and it's a cruel thing to do. It's a cruel thing to suggest that ordinary Russian people who've chosen to live here are in any way responsible for either what's happened or be able to change the course of events by going back. So that's not a great suggestion. Now, I don't know what you're going to think of this, but I'm not a fan of the EU saying that they're going to ban RT and Sputnik.
No, I'm not either.
We are as
Boris
one.
Johnson actually was also on that same side of the coin when it was suggested by Sir Keir Starmer last week that it should be done. And he said, well, that's the kind of thing Russia does. That's not what we do.
Well, thank you, Boris Johnson, and no surprise from Keir Starmer. You see, I mean, I've been invited to give a number of interviews before on RT and Sputnik, and I haven't. There's no right or wrong thing to do, but it hasn't sat quite well with me. The fact is, in Russia, as a journalist, you could be imprisoned or killed. You know, I don't really want to give interviews to their state broadcaster, but I don't think they should be shut down.
Right.
There's a few reasons. First of all, again, it would undermine our moral authority. If you believe in free speech, you shouldn't quell it. If you say no to one station, which station is next? Who's going to be the arbiter and what's acceptable?
Well, as a station that was taken off of YouTube for some nebulous reason that they decided we'd somehow, transgress some unwritten law or other, I'm not in favour of any of that.
No. And you know what? I actually want to see what RT is saying. Because I'll take it with a healthy pinch of salt. Now, RT got the story right about the signal guards who weren't killed. They surrendered.
Right.
Sometimes seeing the other side is useful.
Right.
But also, if we say no RT, will Russia say no EU stations in Russia? Why should Russian people be deprived of that? The best thing is to have all the free speech and the media out there and let people decide for themselves.
Also, we are now in a technological era where you can't really ban anything because somebody will find a way of watching it.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.